Okay, so trick question in the title. It's not actually a gaming room, it's just part of my living room, a room that's shared with my wife and 3 children, so I can't make too many outrageous changes in the decor or anything like that, as it's still a family room. However, my living room is large enough that I can have my own setup, which I'm going to show you through now. The unit itself is an IKEA Besta, which comes in many different configurations. I actually created this configuration myself for my own needs. It cost around £700 and I opted for glass shelving as I felt it looked nicer for display. The top part where the PS2s and PS3 are designed to be wall mounted, but I just attached it to the standing units with screws, a lot of screws just to be sure. It works perfectly for me and looks seamless, like it was designed to be part of the unit all along. Starting from bottom left and going clockwise, I have my Xbox Original, Xbox 360 Arcade, Nintendo 64, 2 DS Lites, Game Boy, Game & Watch Zelda Edition, Super Nintendo or SNES, SNES Classic Mini, PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 Slim and Fat, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, NES Classic Mini, GameCube, Wii, Dreamcast, Mega Drive or Genesis as it's known elsewhere, Amstrad GX4000, Xbox One, and finally for now, Xbox 360S. I like to display a boxed game next to each console. I'll do this using standard plate display stands which I bought off eBay, which are a cheap and effective option. I've done a similar thing for the controllers, and it's still convenient for wired controllers as any cables fall neatly in the middle of the stand. Inside the cupboards I went for the black shelves as they were slightly cheaper, and I'm a bit of a cheapskate and I didn't care because they're out of sight. I also created this small white shelf myself out of spare wood to maximise space in here to store notepads and other things useful to my setup, such as cable management items or torque screwdrivers and the like. In here are also my rechargeable batteries, or what's left of them, as I've got a few dotted around, such as in the Game Boy or Wii controllers. In the other cupboard I have a range of different and spare controllers, including the guitar for Guitar Hero, Buzz controllers, PlayStation multi-taps and the NES Zapper. It's also in here where I access the power sockets through a section crudely cut out at the back, which I wasn't too bothered about making neater as it's not seen during normal use. I have 2 TVs set up as I wanted the CRT for an authentic retro experience, but still needed a newer TV for the HD consoles. I toyed with the idea of just having one large flat screen, but the older consoles wouldn't display very well. This also raised the dilemma of how I'd position another TV next to it. In the end, after much searching for a suitable stand, then amending it when it arrived, I went for the current look, with a newer TV on a stand elevated above the CRT. It actually fits perfectly, and I don't mind the look of having one TV in the gap bottom left, the other top right. The CRT TV is a Samsung Plano 20.5 inch, whereas the other TV is a 31 inch Samsung LED. The Plano is ridiculously large and even more ridiculously heavy, and I had to take this into account when planning to buy a unit, as many weren't wide enough to house a TV of this size. The Samsung LED is not a particularly new TV, but I don't need it to be, and it does for my needs. I deliberately left the original stand on the TV so that it would act as a bit of a shelf for the remote. I'm not sure what I really think about it, but I'm leaving it on for now. The electrics were difficult. There are some gaming console setups you can see on YouTube, but the ones with the most consoles at any given time tend to come from America, and when researching this setup it's clear that they have different products available over there to manage the power for them. I've had to settle for what is essentially 2 extension leads, one of which has space for 12 plugs, the other space for 8. The 12 gang has a switch on each side which switches on only 3 plugs at a time. The other one is similar, in which 2 switches control whether the top row or the bottom row of sockets are turned on. Both extension leads have 4 USB sockets which are used mainly to power the NES and SNES Mini, as well as the lighting behind the unit and some other things. There are extension leads available which are completely individually switched, but none with as many sockets as I needed, so I find that this is my best option for now. I have a HDMI switcher which automatically switches inputs when I turn a console on. The challenge was the older consoles, as I have a lot of consoles that use RF cables, but I solved this using a little hack. I plugged the PS2 into the TV, and those who are as old as me may remember the PS2 had a little adapter allowing you to plug your TV aerial into it, so you didn't need to keep swapping aerials whenever you wanted to watch TV or play your PS2. Instead, I used this part to plug other consoles in rather than a TV aerial, and it works perfectly. There's no other way I know of to simplify the changing over of RF cables, such as any mechanical switches or anything like that, due to their design, but it's simple enough. They're all clipped on the back of the TV and labelled, so it's just a case of plugging in whichever one I need. Finally, those consoles that use composite cables are plugged into this mechanical switch, which makes it simple to just switch to whichever one I want. Currently the other PS2, the Wii and the original Xbox are plugged into it and can be switched to in the blink of an eye. Now, the cables may look a mess to the naked eye, but there's a method to the madness. It's mostly tucked together using Velcro cable ties. Any cables are generally out of view at the back of the TVs. The reality is that with this many consoles and wires, I'm never really going to find an effective cable management solution to minimise how they look. I do make sure after each use that they are turned off at the mains, and the fact that they're all controlled by individual switches on the extensions somewhat reduces any fire risk anyway. When using it normally, you can't see the cables at the back of the TVs. The only exception is this bit covered by the PS3, which wasn't intentional, but as it covers the cables somewhat, I'll just leave it there until I come up with another solution. The reality is that I need access to these cables frequently, whether to switch RF cables or power on or off different consoles, so it works perfectly for me as it is. Talking of cable management, I've also attached clips to the side of the TV, so that when playing the PS2 or the PS3 if the controller's on charge, the cable doesn't dangle down in front of the TV and can instead be clipped neatly out the way. I quite like the look of the original NES and SNES consoles next to their Classic Edition counterparts, and the classic boxes serve another purpose, hiding extra controllers or controller extenders behind them to keep the shelf looking nice and tidy. And it's not just any old NES either, it's my original one from when I was younger, complete with box. The Amstrad is also my original one, and the box is tucked in the loft. It's pretty rare, as when released in 1990, only 15,000 units were ever sold. It wasn't very well received. Each shelving area has these little tags I've made, detailing what the console is and when it was first released in the UK. I've also added a bit of character to display, such as these Mario items, which are actually cardboard coasters, and other figures such as Luigi and Pac-Man. I also like to have a copy of Retro Gamer on display for no particular reason, and all finished off with LED lighting at the rear. There's a remote to change the colour or pattern, but I like how it looks in blue, so I keep it like that, but it can be changed to suit the mood. As I still have the boxes for many of these consoles, I considered displaying them across the top of the unit, but decided against it, purely because I felt having boxes on display in a family living room would make it look tacky. Let me know what you think. Giving the handheld some love, I couldn't not own a grey original Game Boy, as it's the same type I owned as a kid. A DS is essential as I'm a big fan of the Professor Layton games. And the Game & Watch with this cool lit up Triforce plays the first 2 Zelda games on the NES, as well as Link's Awakening from the Game Boy, a treasure from my childhood. Unfortunately, over the years I've sold or swapped many games, which I'm now coming to regret. As a result, my collection for some of these older consoles is quite minimal, but I'm starting to build them up slowly. I also went through a phase during the last generation where I preferred to download games, so I had many games digitally, but I've now reverted back to a preference for physical releases. In this unit, which is actually a CD unit, I have some games stored away, namely for the PS1, SNES and N64. I've also labelled the top of the cartridges for convenience, with the exception of Ocarina of Time, which was already written on my marker when I bought it. Moving over to the main living room area, as this is where I always keep current gen consoles, under here is the PS5 Disc Edition, Xbox Series X, along with the PSVR, Move controllers and Nintendo Switch. The Switch is the limited edition Mario one with 2 Mario Red Joy-Cons. Tucked behind the Switch is a travel case, which I don't use particularly often, but it's useful when needed. The TV is a JVC Fire TV, around 50 inch, with a Samsung soundbar and a subwoofer which is next to the sofa. I'm actually pretty happy with the TV size. I feel anything bigger here in this room would be overwhelming. Unfortunately, when we bought the living room furniture, we felt this unit was better suited to our needs, which isn't a proper TV unit. It's not such an issue for me, as I just created holes for cables in the back, but I just had to be mindful to keep the doors open while playing these consoles to ensure they don't overheat. I've never had a problem before now, including when my PS4 and Xbox One were in here. It's just something for me to be mindful of. All consoles are plugged in and ready to use at a moment's notice, with the exception of the white Xbox 360 Arcade, which is only there for display purposes, as I have the newer and better Xbox 360S. The internet adapter is also there as a reminder of how it used to be done. Last but not least, I've created these clipping covers for over here. These are for the summer to protect the consoles and the plastic from yellowing when the sun blasts through the adjacent windows, which will do for now until I think of a better and easier on the eye solution. I also have a PC. It's not specifically a gaming PC, more a family PC, but it's been useful enough to play a few games on Steam, notably 2016's Hitman, which I first completed on PC, or the last Football Manager game I bought, FM20. It's a Lenovo all-in-one, however, in truth, it's not fancy enough in terms of gaming to warrant me showing you more. So what do you think? I'd love to hear your suggestions and questions below. Until next time, thanks for watching.